Welcome! You're listening to the Uncharted Lancaster podcast, where we explore the hidden histories, forgotten places, and long-buried secrets of Lancaster County. Using modern digital storytelling tools, each episode brings a new piece of local lore to life, revealing the strange, the surprising, and the story's history left behind. Let's begin.
Okay, so let's get into this. We're heading deep into a corner of American history that, frankly, should be a lot more famous than it is.
It really should.
When most people think about American outlaws, their minds go straight to the Wild West, right? Jesse James, Billy the Kid.
Of course.
But we're looking at Pennsylvania in the 1880s, and this story proves that these criminal legends, they were thriving right under the nose of major East Coast cities. We are talking about the Buzzard Gang.
Right. Outlaws whose exploits were so daring, so headline-grabbing, that the papers at the time actually dubbed them the Jesse James of the East Coast.
And this wasn't just some local story. Their exploits, their crimes, they were big enough to land in the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and yet somehow, today, they're largely forgotten.
That's absolutely right. And for this deep dive, we're plunging into the world of the Buzzard Gang. And you have to understand, this was primarily a band of brothers operating out of the rugged Welsh Mountains of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
And for you, the listener, we've pulled together source material that really covers their entire arc.
It really does. It spans their criminal peak, that intense period in the 1870s and 1880s, all the way through to their very strange and contradictory later years.
Our mission here is pretty clear then. We need to unpack the forces that created this legend. We're going to be looking at how extreme poverty, the unique geography of those mountains, and, some really incredible, audacious criminal ingenuity all came together to shape their notorious reign.
And it really is a compelling look at a different kind of American banditry. This is a classic rags to infamy tale, and it's rooted in that post-Civil War poverty.
Right.
The whole thing starts with the family patriarch, John Buzzard. He served with the 79th Pennsylvania Volunteers during the war. He actually died of disease down in Kentucky in 1862.
And that one event just plunges his widow, Mary Ann Blair, into, immediate and severe poverty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Suddenly, she's left to raise 8 children on her own. 6 of them were sons: Martin, John, Abe, Ike, Jacob, and Joseph. And she's doing this in one of the most impoverished, isolated parts of the state.
That economic vacuum, caused by the father's death, that feels like the central tragedy here. These mountains, they offered this beautiful, rugged isolation, but almost no legitimate way to make a living, especially for a single mother trying to feed 6 growing boys.
And it's interesting, when you look through the documents, you see all these name variations. Sometimes it's Buzzard or Bowser.
Which points to how fluid record-keeping was back then, I imagine.
Completely. But the family that became infamous in Lancaster County, they settled on Buzzard, spelled just like the scavenging bird.
Which is, unfortunately, a very fitting name for the reputation they were about to build.
A very apt name, yes.
Yeah.
Given how they lived off what they could scavenge or steal.
What's really fascinating here, and what I think truly sets the stage for their life of crime, is that the family's first big brush with the law, it didn't even involve the sons.
No, it didn't. The first Buzzard to get tangled up with the legal system was Mary Ann herself, the matriarch.
And what was the charge?
She was working for a man named Elmaker and was arrested for stealing food. She was caught taking apple butter, sausage, butter, and lard.
Wow.
When you look at what she took, it just screams desperation. This was almost certainly a mother trying to feed her large, starving family.
And what was the sentence? For stealing food?
6 months in prison.
6 months. For apple butter and sausage? That punishment feels incredibly heavy, especially for a widow in her situation.
It was incredibly heavy. And it really speaks volumes about how the courts at that time viewed the rural poor. In the 19th century, property rights were just sacrosanct.
So her motive didn't matter?
Not at all. The court saw theft, and the motive was irrelevant. It was a crime that demanded severe deterrence. There was no leniency for her circumstances.
Right.
And that one event, the mother being locked up for stealing food to survive, that feels like the moment the whole family was irrevocably stamped with a criminal identity.
It effectively criminalized the act of survival. It's a tragic origin story, and it just underscores the complete lack of any kind of social safety net in 19th century America. Once Mary Ann was branded a criminal, it must have become almost impossible for her sons to find legitimate work in that community.
That's the cycle. And when we look at the sons, they're Their criminal evolution was fast, and it was intense. They didn't just stumble into grand larceny. They started small, but they scaled up their operation very, very quickly.
Absolutely. The Buzzard boys started with, the classic signs of delinquency born of necessity. We have accounts of them stealing chickens, petty store thefts.
Right, and then trying to sell whatever they pilfered at the local market just to get by.
But by the 1870s, that small-time crime was gone.
Yeah.
The focus shifted completely, and two of the brothers, Abe and Isaac or Ike, they step up to lead a dedicated gang. And at its peak, this gang sometimes had about 20 men.
And you see, this wasn't just about necessity anymore. This was organized, professional criminality. They began orchestrating these elaborate burglaries, targeting high-value locations.
Which is what really separates them from just being simple farm thieves.
Exactly. They started hitting railroad stations, general stores, massive ironworks factories, and eventually, jewelry shops. They weren't just stealing food anymore. They were taking money, jewelry, liquor, cigars, weapons items that funded a professional outlaw lifestyle.
And we see these clear examples of their early daring. I mean, take the Lebanon Ironworks heist in 1875.
A huge score for them. They broke in and walked away with $1,000.
And $1,000 then. I mean, that's life-changing money for a working family. It would have required some intricate planning to get into a secure industrial facility like that.
And after that, they successfully hit the Bird in Hand Railroad station, stealing cash and whiskey. It just shows they were thinking bigger, they understood logistics. But this is also where the legend of their resilience begins to take root. It shows how dangerous this life was.
What happened?
Well, after robbing a store in the town of Shonik, Ike Buzzard was shot in the back of the head by a local resident who surprised them during the robbery.
Wait, a headshot. And he survived? That sounds like the kind of detail that turns a criminal into a legend overnight.
Miraculously, yes. He survived the incident. And the source material notes he carried the damage from that wound for the rest of his life. He later claimed that this very injury was the direct cause of him eventually going blind.
So that kind of resilience or just, sheer unbelievable luck, that played right into their growing mythos. They were seen as men who were simply untouchable.
But they kept pushing their luck, despite these close calls. In 1880, they planned what they thought would be a massive score at the Oxford Coal and Lumber Yard. They spent all this time and effort breaking into the safe, expecting a huge payday. They found 50 cents.
50 cents after all that work.
A completely humiliating disappointment. It must have made them furious. But what's so telling is they didn't just retreat. They were adaptable. They were determined to make the night pay.
So what do they do?
They immediately went and ransacked a nearby jewelry store instead. They stole 23 silver watches and 8 gold watches. It shows how flexible they were. When the big cash score failed, they went right for easily fenced, valuable goods.
And their crimes, they frequently ended in these dramatic chases, right? It really highlights the struggle of rural law enforcement back then.
It does. Following a general store looting in Bart Township, they were discovered and chased by a hastily assembled posse from Georgetown. And they used their intimate knowledge of the area, escaping on stolen horses right back toward the shelter of the mountains. They knew exactly how to leverage that terrain, even early on.
This cycle leads us back to that analysis of poverty and crime. And the sources make a crucial distinction here. It's not just a simple cause and effect.
Right. Abe Buzzard later claimed he was, and this is a quote, worse than homeless after his first release from prison because no one would hire him. He felt that the brand of the criminal made legitimate work impossible.
So the context was incredibly harsh. Poverty, losing their father, the isolation. But the escalation to organized, large-scale, and, increasingly violent crime was ultimately a choice. Maybe one that was heavily influenced by a perceived lack of alternatives.
Precisely. And the source material's very clear on this.
Yeah.
While many other families in the Welsh Mountains faced similar destitution, they didn't turn to banditry.
Right.
But for the Buzzards, the organized nature of their crime, the high stakes, and the development of this structured gang.
Yeah.
It meant they moved past just being struggling farmers. They became full-fledged bandits ruling the local shadows.
That idea of ruling the shadows, that brings us directly to the centerpiece of their entire operation, the Blue Rocks.
Yes.
This wasn't just a convenient spot to hide out. This was a strategic, almost legendary fortress deep in the heart of the Welsh Mountains.
The terrain is everything in this story. The Blue Rocks are described as this naturally formed, rugged, labyrinthine formation of massive boulders, rock outcroppings, and dense, unforgiving forest.
So basically impenetrable for anyone who didn't know the area.
Exactly.
Yep.
Especially for, flatland law enforcement. It became the Buzzards' near impregnable stronghold.
And Abe Buzzard wasn't shy about boasting about this, was he? He claimed they could see the electric lights of Lancaster City all the way from their perch.
Which is an incredible visual, and it confirms their incredible foresight and mastery of the land. Being able to see the city lights meant they could literally watch posses gathering in the nearby villages like Ephrata or Bowmansville before the lawmen even started their slow, hard journey up the mountain.
So they always knew when they were coming.
They were always one crucial step ahead. Their intimate knowledge of that terrain meant they could predict movements, they could set up ambushes. They were in complete control.
And the local lore surrounding the Blue Rocks is just astonishing. There are these persistent legends about a secret cave. Is there any evidence they actually built a hidden lair?
Yes, the local lore is very strong on this. It maintains that Abe and Ike actually excavated a hidden chamber beneath the largest, most stable boulders.
They dug it out themselves.
That's the story. And they concealed the entrance very cleverly with a massive movable rock, supposedly using counterweights or levers that only they understood. This wasn't just some basic campsite. It was a permanent operational base.
Just imagine the sheer effort involved in that. Excavating and stabilizing a hidden chamber under tons of rock just to hold stolen goods and shelter the gang. It reinforces this idea that this was not a temporary flight from the law. This was a permanent, chosen lifestyle.
They were building infrastructure for their criminal enterprise, yes.
And the strategic use of the landscape, it had deep historical roots in that area, didn't it?
It did. The Welsh Mountains had long been a sanctuary for people on the margins of society. Native Americans, later escaped enslaved individuals seeking freedom, poor farmers, general outcasts, anyone who wanted isolation from established authority.
So the Buzzard Gang just leveraged that history perfectly. They could blend in with sympathizers and other people living off the grid who probably had little love for the county authorities to begin with.
Exactly. They became masters of disappearing into that complex landscape whenever the pressure was on. The mountains became the silent partner in their crimes.
And a very effective partner at that. The mountains still hold their secrets too.
They do. Despite decades of searching and all these local stories claiming the Buzzards buried extensive caches of stolen goods among the boulders cache, jewelry, no treasure has ever been recovered.
So what happened to the cave itself? Did the authorities ever find it?
Well, by the 1930s, the cave was definitely out of use. The sources give us conflicting stories on its fate, which only adds to the mystery.
What are the theories?
Some locals claim that they eventually went in and dynamited the entrance shut. They were tired of the mountains being used as a criminal hideout.
Wow.
Others believe it simply collapsed naturally over time, just swallowed by the shifting earth and the heavy boulders.
Yeah.
Either way, the physical fortress is gone, but the legend is still firmly rooted in Lancaster County.
Well, the gang's notoriety wasn't just built on their ability to hide. It was built on these spectacular high-stakes crimes that really became defining moments for the communities they hit.
That's very true. For instance, in Bowmansville, local events were often described as happening either before or after the Great Robbery.
That's how you know you've really made criminal history. The Great Robbery. This took place on November 29th, 1884. The target was the D.B. Schiffer jewelry store and watch repair shop.
And they weren't satisfied with just looting the display cases. They stole the entire safe.
The entire safe, not just the contents.
The whole thing. They hauled it out of there. And that safe contained a remarkable haul. 30 brand new watches and 22 repair watches.
Yeah.
52 valuable timepieces.
A huge haul. That must have spurred a massive reaction from the community.
It did. An immediate, intense reaction, which led to the mobilization of this interesting organization.
And we have to talk about the law enforcement they faced here. It wasn't just a sheriff. It was the Vigilante Horse Thieves Detective Association.
Right. It sounds like something out of a pulp novel. But this was a real organization, essentially a private police force, funded by local farmers and businessmen.
And they were probably more effective than the actual sheriff's office.
Far more feared and perhaps more dedicated. They sprang into action immediately. They found the heavy safe discarded near Pine Grove Church, pried open and empty. And this confirmed the escape path, straight back toward the Buzzards' domain in the Welsh Mountains.
And the investigation paid off pretty quickly, didn't it? Thanks to the gang being a little sloppy.
A little sloppy. They captured a newer gang member, George Lippincott, trying to jump a train in Lancaster City. He had 22 of the stolen watches in his possession.
So that was damning, direct evidence.
It was the smoking gun. It linked the Buzzards directly to the robbery and proved they were operating as a cohesive unit. After that, the pressure on Abe must have become unbearable.
The authorities were determined to get him.
Absolutely. They offered a staggering $1,000 reward for Abe Buzzard, dead or alive.
And we have to put that number in context. $1,000 back then is equivalent to over $30,000 today. Who did that incentivize?
Everyone. That kind of money didn't just motivate professional bounty hunters. It tempted poor local farmers, neighbors, even people who might have been sympathetic to the gang. It turned the hunt for Abe into a county-wide obsession. He was Lancaster County's most wanted man.
And he was eventually arrested following his conviction for this, though his criminal career was far from over.
Far from it.
You know, this romantic reputation of the wily folk hero bandit, it's often contradicted by just the outright visceral violence of some of their actions.
It is.
And nothing shows that more than the brutal attack on an 89-year-old farmer named Isaiah Schaefer in 1893. This really counters the idea of them as just some kind of hapless, petty criminals.
That incident is a very dark stain on the Buzzard legend. Martin Buzzard and a partner, Brown Zeltner, broke into Schaefer's home. They were convinced he was hiding a large amount of money.
And Schaefer, despite being 89, he fought back.
He did. He didn't panic. He grabbed a fire poker and defended himself.
And Martin Buzzard's response was just chilling brutality. He shot the elderly man 3 times.
Yes. And the outcome was an absolute miracle. Schaefer survived. His thick woolen outer garments and heavy clothing actually slowed the bullets enough to save his life. He lived for many more years after that.
How was Martin caught for that?
He was tracked down via the unique hoof prints of a stolen horse. They led directly back to a known hideout. He was captured and sentenced to 16 years. And this just confirms that serious, life-threatening violence was always on the table for them.
Shifting gears drastically from that brutality, we have to talk about the incident that must have severely bruised Abe's outlaw ego, the one that became a source of endless local mockery.
Ah, yes. The humiliating failure of the left-footed shoes.
This is the kind of blunder that becomes local legend. It's probably remembered more easily than any successful heist.
Without a doubt. So the gang meticulously planned a heist on a traveling shoe salesman's vehicle. They were certain it contained cash or valuable merchandise that would be easy to fence.
They successfully break into this heavy wagon in the dead of night. They pry open the doors, only to discover that the entire cargo consisted solely of left-footed shoes.
Nothing but left shoes. The source material confirms this became an immediate running joke in the area. The newspapers that usually sensationalize their exploits, even they mocked them for this.
They had a huge haul of literally useless, unsaleable goods. You can't just walk away with a wagon full of left shoes.
So Abe and his crew were forced to abandon the entire useless cargo and just retreat empty-handed. For a gang that pulled off elaborate prison breaks and hit ironworks, being foiled by mismatched footwear is... well, it's the ultimate indignity.
It really shows that even the Jesse James of the East could be defeated by the mundane logistics of retail inventory.
Abe Buzzard's true legend, though, was really cemented in these high-drama shootouts and his incredible ability to evade capture. He spent 22 months on the run after that big prison break in 1883.
And during that time, he was the target of one of the highest bounties in the region. The comparison to Jesse James was earned through just sheer audacity.
And we should focus on one of the most famous events from that time on the run. The 2-mile Lincoln gunfight. This happened in 1883, shortly after the jailbreak we'll get to in a moment.
Okay.
Abe and a fellow outlaw, John Clifford, they broke into Hollinger's general store in Lincoln. They stole cash, clothing, and over $4,000 worth of goods.
And the store owner, A.B. Hollinger, he wasn't the type to just wait for the sheriff.
No, he was furious. He immediately assembled and armed a posse of local men. They tracked Abe and Clifford down to a nearby field. And when Hollinger called for them to surrender,
Abe's response was to open fire.
Immediately. And that kicked off this chaotic running battle.
And this wasn't a quick skirmish, right? The sources describe a gunfight that stretched over 2 miles.
2 miles across open fields, through fences, into stands of trees. Abe was known to be a skilled marksman. He wasn't just spraying bullets, he was firing methodically as they fled. He was aiming to disable his pursuers.
And he was effective.
Highly effective and dangerous. Abe shot one of the posse members, a man named Ellis Bard, multiple times. Struck him in the face, arm, and chest. The shot to the face knocked out 2 of Bard's teeth.
But Bard survived.
Miraculously, he survived. But the ruthlessness of the attack was clear. Abe was fighting for his freedom, and he was absolutely willing to kill.
What happened to his partner, Clifford?
Clifford was wounded in the leg and captured by the posse. But Abe, despite possibly being wounded himself during the exchange, he just vanished into the dense Ephrata Mountains. Once again, confirming his reputation as this untouchable renegade, he just melted back into the underbrush like a ghost.
And there's an incredible ironic footnote to this story, isn't there, involving the man he shot, Ellis Bard.
It's one of the strangest twists in the whole saga. Years later, Ellis Bard, the man Abe shot multiple times, was arrested for his own unrelated crime.
Don't tell me they ended up in the same prison.
They did. Bard and Abe Buzzard later served time together at the Eastern State Penitentiary. Imagine that reunion. The shooter and the victim, now both wearing the same prison uniform, living side by side.
That's just an amazing, colorful anecdote. It perfectly encapsulates the chaotic and strangely close-knit nature of the criminal world in the region back then.
That boldness, that survival, it had serious consequences, though. After the gunfight, authorities raised the reward for Abe's capture to a staggering $5,000.
$5,000? That's almost $150,000 in modern currency.
It was one of the highest rewards ever offered in the region, and that absolutely cemented his status as the Jesse James of the East Coast. The comparison isn't just because he robbed people, it's because he was untouchable and inspired this massive, expensive manhunt.
That reward money turned him into the most hunted man in Pennsylvania. And the attempts to capture him became more desperate, right? They started bringing in outside forces.
They did, like the high-profile Philadelphia detective Bartholomew in 1884.
And he found him.
He did. Detective Bartholomew tracked Abe down on Ephrata Mountain and cornered him. But Abe was true to form. He refused to surrender and initiated yet another shootout. Bartholomew managed to return fire and actually struck Abe in the shoulder.
So he was wounded and still got away. How did he manage that?
He knew the fire roads and the goat paths of those mountains better than the posses knew their own backyards. Despite a severe wound, Abe somehow mustered the strength and the terrain knowledge to just disappear into the dense woods. He slipped right through the detective's grasp.
So that massive manhunt, that huge bounty, it was only necessary because Abe was free in the first place.
Right.
So let's go back. Let's talk about the event that started this whole 22-month chase. The ingenious Great Lancaster prison break of 1883. This really showcased the Buzzard Gang's cunning.
Absolutely. This break, which was orchestrated primarily by Ike Buzzard, was so complex and so successful that it held the record as the most daring and elaborate in the county's history for nearly 100 years. It happened on October 10th, 1883.
And the sources give us this perfect setup, like something out of a heist movie. The prison was unusually understaffed that night.
Right, because a major boxing match in the city had distracted most of the regular staff. Only 2 guards were on duty, Amos Lutz and Edward Sample.
And the Buzzards were masters of preparation. Guard Sample was actually distracted at the time.
He was. He was getting a haircut right there in the prison from another inmate named Billy Weeder, who just happened to be a known Buzzard associate.
Meanwhile, Ike and Joe Buzzard are in a cell across the hall from Abe, ready to make their move.
And here is where the ingenuity in the bird kicks in, the canary ploy.
I love this part of the story.
Ike had a pet canary, and he had trained it to return to its cage whenever its young chirped. The brothers had specifically separated the mother bird from its chicks, and they'd placed the chicks in Abe's cell.
So Ike uses this natural animal behavior as a sophisticated emotional prop.
He does. As Guard Lutz is making his evening rounds, Ike makes this simple, seemingly innocent, almost sentimental request. Could he please pass the caged mother canary to Abe? The poor bird was apparently distraught over being separated from his chicks. He was playing on the guard's sympathy.
And Lux fell for it.
He did. Seeing no harm in this seemingly harmless gesture, he unlocked Ike's cell, he took the cage, and then, crucially, he unlocked Abe's cell to hand it off.
And that was the mistake.
That was the fatal mistake. The moment Abe's heavy cell door swung open, Ike and Joe pounced on Lutz. They wrestled him violently to the ground, snatched the keys from his belt.
And locked the guard inside Abe's now empty cell.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Guard Sample is still in the middle of his haircut. He suddenly finds himself locked into a cell with his own barber. The escape was now a full, successful internal takeover, executed with a pet bird and a pair of scissors.
Incredible. With the keys, Ike just starts freeing other prisoners.
He does, including a notorious one-eyed horse thief named John Frankfurt. They all rush to cell number 9, which the guards used for storage, and they arm themselves with weapons and extra clothing.
But there was one final obstacle. It wasn't human.
No, it was the prison keeper's dog, Bruno. A fiercely loyal guard dog, specifically trained to attack fleeing inmates.
Poor Bruno. He tried to stop a rush of 12 determined men.
He fought bravely, trying to protect his keeper's domain. But the group of inmates severely beat the dog and left him behind in the prison yard.
And he was the only casualty.
The only one. The sources confirm Bruno died 2 weeks later from his injuries.
So 12 prisoners broke free that night, including the core leaders Ike and Abe. But one detail here is particularly strange. Joe Buzzard, who helped plan it and subdue the guard, he chose to stay behind.
He did. Joe only had a few months left on his sentence. He clearly decided that the risk of a long manhunt, getting shot for a reward, and facing decades more in prison just wasn't worth it.
The other fugitives scattered. Ike actually made it all the way to Davenport, Iowa, before he was arrested in July 1884. But Abe, he just vanished back into the Welsh Mountains, which led to that long crime spree we talked about.
Right, fueled by the knowledge of that bounty on his head.
And he eventually turned himself in, which seems like such an anticlimactic end to that legendary flight.
He did, on June 3, 1885. And the sources strongly suggest his motivation was purely strategic.
He didn't want anyone to collect the reward money.
Exactly. If he turned himself in, no bounty hunter got paid. Both Abe and Ike were then transferred to the notorious Eastern State Penitentiary. And interestingly, they never attempted another jailbreak, even though we know they had tried a less successful one back in 1882.
What happened then?
Abe and 7 others literally tunneled under the prison wall and came up inside the prison's chicken coop. They were true masters of finding and exploiting the weak points in any system.
The final chapter of Abe Buzzard's life is just defined by this strange, compelling transformation. I mean, you can only describe it as peak irony, from feared outlaw to self-styled preacher.
It is the ultimate contradiction. As Abe got older and spent more time locked up, he adopted this peculiar new persona, a self-styled Mennonite preacher. He even wrote and delivered a sermon called Ruin and Redemption.
And he took it on the road?
He did. He traveled a circuit to hotels and churches after he was released. And of course, his reputation as the Jesse James of the East guaranteed big crowds. People flocked to his sermons, curious to see the spectacle of this notorious outlaw claiming to have found God.
They wanted the story, not necessarily the sermon.
Exactly. But the sincerity of this. This reform was immediately met with widespread and I'd say justifiable doubt. While he spoke passionately about redemption, his reasoning often sounded very self-serving. He was shifting the blame from himself to his circumstances.
Right, that narrative that society made him an outlaw. He positioned himself as a victim, saying he was worse than homeless, and insisting, I was an outlaw because society made me one, by refusing to give him work.
And did anyone buy it? I mean, did this religious conversion seem genuine, or was it just a strategic move?
The sources suggest skepticism was the default public view. Many saw it as a performance, maybe to generate sympathy, maybe to make a little cash, since he charged admission for some of these sermons.
And his actions certainly undermined his pious message.
Oh, completely. Stories circulated that he would sign stolen Bibles and distribute them to the attendees as, religious souvenirs. It's a deeply strange detail that perfectly encapsulates his contradictory nature. And one contemporary newspaper account went even further. It claimed that while Abe was giving his rousing sermon, some of his old partners in crime were busy burglarizing the homes of the parishioners who came to listen.
Now, the source notes that's likely conjecture or exaggeration, but the fact that people believed it could be true, it just speaks to the pervasive skepticism around his so-called reform.
The image of the reformed outlaw was just constantly tainted by the reality of the criminal. And ultimately, that cycle of crime never truly broke for Abe.
No, it didn't. In the late 1920s, he was arrested yet again, and this time, ironically, for stealing chickens. A return to his very earliest, most desperate crimes.
That's a sad end for a man who once commanded a $5,000 bounty. He was classified as a habitual criminal and sent back to Eastern State Penitentiary, where he died in prison in 1935. He never truly escaped.
And that criminal life, it took a toll on the family itself. There was a major fracture that occurred. Abe and his brother Martin, once partners, they became sworn enemies after Martin was captured for shooting Isaiah Schaefer.
Martin betrayed Abe. He insisted that his brother had been involved in crimes he hadn't actually committed, probably to try and reduce his own sentence.
Right. And the source is clear. The brothers never spoke again after that. The Buzzard Gang didn't just fight the law. In the end, they fought each other.
Martin, however, seems to have genuinely found redemption after his time in prison.
He does. Upon his release, he joined the Mennonite Church and attempted a real rehabilitation. He seems to have broken the cycle. Abe, unfortunately, just could not.
And there's that telling reflection from Joe Buzzard, the brother who stayed behind in the jailbreak. He later remarked that between all the brothers, they had spent a collective 158 years incarcerated.
And yet he still insisted, quote, "None of us were really ever bad. We just got started wrong." That's the family's attempt to reconcile their notoriety with their difficult origins.
But the story ends with genuine redemption for the descendants. Abe's son, Jake, eventually moved west to California and led a quiet life. Another brother, John, had turned his back on crime very early on.
And that transformation has been lasting. Today, the modern-day Buzzards in Lancaster County are described as upstanding citizens dedicated to community service. They've successfully shed the criminal taint of their ancestors. The brand of the criminal eventually faded, even if the legend remains.
We've covered a massive amount of ground in the Welsh Mountains today, tracing the life of the Buzzard Gang from stealing chickens to high-stakes heists and one of the most elaborate prison breaks in state history.
All executed with a pet canary.
All with a pet canary. We've seen the sheer audacity that earned Abe that $5,000 bounty, the bloody 2-mile gunfights, and that bizarre moment when their meticulously planned robbery yielded nothing but left-footed shoes.
It's a compelling, complex story of survival, cunning, violence, and ultimately betrayal, all wrapped up in one family name.
The story of the Buzzard Gang really shows us how this volatile mix of severe poverty, combined with geographical isolation and remarkable individual cunning, can simultaneously create local folk heroes and notorious villains.
And their tale reminds us that not all famous American outlaws rode horses in the Wild West. Some were just one valley away, living lives shaped by intense social and economic hardship right here in the East.
And that leads to the crucial takeaway, rooted in Abe Buzzard's own desperate defense. He claimed society made him an outlaw by refusing him work after prison, stamping him with that brand.
It raises an important question for us today. In an era of information overload and complex social systems, where past mistakes are digitized and often permanent, how do modern communities balance justice with genuine reintegration for those seeking redemption?
The legend of the Buzzards suggests that sometimes the reputation you get for your mistakes is far harder to escape than the prison walls themselves.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Uncharted Lancaster podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating or review wherever you listen. It really helps more people discover the show. For more fascinating local history, visit unchartedlancaster.com. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out one of Adam Zern's books at unchartedlancaster.com/books. Until next time, keep exploring.